Hello, good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We're gonna take a minute to let folks kind of trickle in here and for our comms folks to stream us to Facebook, which I believe we are now doing. So just heads up to folks in the Zoom, we are streaming to Facebook. If you're on Facebook, you can also join us on Zoom if you'd like, but our comms team will try to share relevant information in the Facebook Live chat as well. Thanks everyone for your time this afternoon. My name is Chelsea Barnes. I'm the Director of Government Affairs and Strategy at Appalachian Voices. And welcome to our weekly Holler at Congress. We recognize that there's a lot going on in the federal space right now and for the past few months, and it can be really hard to keep track of everything that's going on and even harder to know where to plug in and help advocate for your community. So this weekly event is our effort to ease that struggle and help folks make a difference for their communities in this chaotic time. There's a lot going on in the administration with the quasi-governmental agency, the Department of Government Efficiency, as well as in Congress with things actively moving around a reconciliation bill and appropriations. And while everyone agrees that the federal government could use some efficiency improvements, as Elon Musk himself has noted, they are getting some stuff wrong. So all this is to say that there is a lot going on, but we know that one of the most effective things that people can do is to simply call their members of Congress and tell them what they're concerned about. And if we're all calling about the same things, we make a bigger impact. So each week we are picking a different subject of something that's going on, and we're going to make calls to members of Congress during this time, during our Thursday slot. But if you or your friends can't make it during this time, we will also provide a toolkit and an action alert that you can use to make calls on your own time. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin, who's going to tell us what we're calling about this week.
Thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Zidak. I am a government affairs specialist here with Appalachian Voices. And this week we are calling about FEMA, demanding FEMA aid for Helene survivors and asking Congress to fix, not gut FEMA in the future. So a little bit of background here that you can kind of follow along to some of this if we drop the toolkit in the chat. But as folks here are probably aware, Hurricane Helene was the deadliest hurricane since Katrina to hit the contiguous US when it moved through Florida, Georgia, up the Appalachian Mountains at the end of September of last year. We are now 7 months later, and many people in local and state governments are still waiting for federal aid. Since taking office in January, President Trump has talked repeatedly about FEMA's failures to efficiently disperse aid to Helene survivors. In his first week in office, he signed an executive order establishing the FEMA Review Council, which is a group of lawmakers and other stakeholders to assess FEMA's operations and make recommendations to improve efficiencies in the department that will help expedite aid delivery. While the agency has provided substantial support to state and local governments' recovery from Helene, it's kind of been a patchwork of aid, and there's still massive gaps in the distribution of $29 billion approved by Congress last year. So there was a big fight leading up to the end of the year on getting a disaster package through Congress before the holidays. We had coverage of folks in temporary housing, living in travel trailers, kind of a setup heading into the winter months. And Congress was able to get this aid approved. We now have holdups in getting it distributed. One of the big issues is the complexities of the FEMA application process. It's difficult to know what forms to fill out. People fill out forms and don't hear anything, and when they check up a couple months later, they're told that their application was mysteriously withdrawn. There are just a lot of issues in accessing aid that need to be simplified. And for those who have who are waiting approval, they need recovery dollars now. At the same time that folks are waiting to hear back about their disaster aid, there are ongoing conversations in the federal government at the Department of Homeland Security, where FEMA is housed, about dismantling FEMA entirely. limiting its scope of work to only providing disasters in whatever form survives the dismantling. If it's just kind of a small office in the White House, it's just meant to be a disaster aid distribution office, and forcing states to administer all of the programs for emergency preparedness. So really shifting that burden from the federal government to individual states to figure out their resilience plans, fund major infrastructure projects that can lower flood risk, and lower risk to other hazards. Obviously, this is pretty focused on flooding because of the impact of Hurricane Helene, but we also see the impacts of wildfires across the Carolinas recently, and those kind of things. So shifting that all to the state level will be bad. Eliminating FEMA would be a bad deal for Appalachia. Appalachian state budgets are not able to absorb the collective benefits of that national tax income, being able to say, we have the pot of money from federal taxes to be able to distribute to individual projects across the region. It would all come down to the state taxpayers, for state budgets that are already operating pretty lean, and don't have much appetite to increase. So it's really critical for our region that FEMA continue to fund pre-disaster mitigation work, lower those risks, to disaster, and administer aid to victims of disasters more quickly. Those are kind of our two asks here: is get aid to survivors of Hurricane Helene, and fix don't gut FEMA. So we're going to do our call to action here this afternoon. Whenever I wrap up talking and going through instructions, where we can contact your 2 senators and representative. Our toolkit that is in the chat can help you find the email address, contact form, and phone number for your elected officials. And this Capitol switchboard number, someone could drop that in the chat as well. Well, if you call into that, can connect you to your respective offices whenever you talk to the switchboard. So we have a sample script here for you. This is also in the toolkit for easy reference, so don't be too worried. But really, the rundown is, as I said, calling today to express you can choose the emotion that you feel about the situation. The victims of Hurricane Helene are still waiting on aid from FEMA. It's unacceptable that Congress has provided the funding, but FEMA still has not gotten it out the door. And that's kind of what we're talking, that's what we're talking to offices about, is saying, hey, you've given this funding, you need to follow up with FEMA and tell them to get it out the door. It's a lot of hard work to rebuild after a disaster. Appalachians rose to the occasion in the immediate aftermath. We have plenty of stories of folks using their own bulldozers to clear debris, makeshift bridges across rivers where people were deserted. But now it's the federal government that needs to step up and provide funding so people can repair their homes and get their businesses back up and running. It's also their responsibility to ensure that FEMA is not dismantled, but is fixed. We're not ready to absorb the responsibilities of a major federal agency on the state level. And it's really puts our communities at risk to talk about dismantling FEMA entirely. So we need to fix FEMA, not gut it, and get disaster aid to Helene victims now. I will pause there. If there are any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, if we could get the toolkit one more time, just to be on the safe side in the chat, we'll go off mute and start making phone calls. This is an opportunity for folks to, say in the chat who you're calling. What kind of reception are you getting from the office whenever you talk to folks? Are people listening to you? There's also information in the toolkit about sending an email, sharing on social media, letting other people know that you made calls today to tell Congress to get on FEMA about getting aid out and fixing the agency. This is your opportunity to advocate. So I will go off mute. Feel free to drop updates in the chat as you go. And we can keep checking in here as folks wrap up. So go forth and make phone calls. We'll chat soon.